Hey guys, welcome. In this video, we're gonna start writing the main game loop. We're gonna create a window, create a renderer, and hopefully get some graphics up and running, drawing on the screen by the end of it. But first, we need to set up SDL. And I actually made a video on setting up SDL on Windows. It's this one. It's called How to Set Up SDL on Command Line on Windows. I'll link it up in the description so you can find it easily. But this basically goes through the whole process of downloading SDL, including it inside the project, linking against it, compiling with it, running it. Everything is here. So if you don't know how to do that stuff, just watch this one because I'm not going to go into it too deeply here. I'm just going to breeze through it and we'll get to coding and the fun part soon, hopefully. So first, let's take a look at the build script because I made some changes to it. And this build script will be the final one we're going to use for the most part. I'm actually going to get rid of this stuff here. Okay, now let's actually change this to SDL Pong exe. Okay, great. So this is basically the line that compiles our game. It's almost the same as the last one. It has the compiler flags here, and now it has the linker flags here. So to use the linker, to give flags to the linker, you just need to use this -link option here. And then you can give it some flags. And the linker flags are here, and the compiler flags are here. So let's go through these one by one and try to understand them. So in order to use SDL, we need three things basically. Well, first we need to download it, which, like I said, all that stuff is explained in that video, so go watch that one if you don't have it installed. But first, the three things. The first one is the header files. We need to include them inside of our source code. The second one is the lib files, which are basically just some library stuff. It's not even a library because we're using DLLs, which are called dynamically linked libraries. So all the SDL's code is compiled for us in the form of a DLL, so we need to link that to our own executable in order to use SDL's code. So the lib files are basically like a middleman that lets the linker know about that stuff. So we need those. And finally, we need the actual DLL. So the way we tell the compiler where to look for the include files is with this command, -i. So you type -i and you give it the path to your include files. In this case, mine is under dev include, which I can show you real quick. So inside my C drive, I have a folder called dev. Inside dev, I have a folder called include. And this has a bunch of header files for different libraries, SDL being one of them. As you can see, SDL is here, and I have all my SDL headers here. And the second one, so this command basically tells the compiler when you're looking for header files, look here first, then you can look in other places. Everything else is same here. So the libs here, okay, let's actually take a look at linker flags first, because we're using that libs inside of this variable called common linker flags. So this first one just lets us name the executable, which is just optional. You don't have to do this, but this way you can just name your executable whatever you want. You can call it whatever.exe, it doesn't matter. And the second one is similar to this -i command here. It's called dash. You can actually use dash. You can use this / or dash. It's the same thing basically. So this lib path lets us give the linker a path to look for when it's searching for these .lib files. And in this case, it's going to be the C drive dev lib, which is here. And this has all the .lib files for SDL and for some other stuff as well. And after that, we're actually going to tell the linker which files, like which lib files to look for, which in this case are SDL2 main.lib, SDL2.lib, and user32.lib and shell32.lib. And finally, we're setting the subsystem to be console because we want a little console to pop up when we run our game. If you don't want this, you can also set this to window. when you're shipping the game, you don't want this to be set to console because you don't want the console to pop up when a player plays the game. So that's basically it. This is gonna make sure that the compiler can get access to our header files and also the lib files. And finally, like I said, there are 3 steps: the include files, the header files, the lib files, and the DLLs. And the DLLs are inside a bin directory that I created here. And normally what you would do is you would copy the SDL DLLs next to your executable. So you would go to the build directory here and you would copy the DLLs here. What I do is actually I set up an environment variable. You can find those by typing environment into the search bar here inside of the start menu. Click on this, environment variables, and you need to find a path variable here. You need to edit this. And in here, I have a variable for dev bin, which you can just create easily by clicking browse, and you can browse to the directory that you have your DLLs, and you need to select that like this, and you click OK, and once it's here, it's basically as if anything can access it from anywhere. It's a global path, basically. So that's why we don't need to include the DLLs, add the DLLs next to the executable. But if you were to ship your game, you don't want to ship it like this. You want to actually copy all the DLLs inside this folder so that your executable can find it. Because if the user playing the game doesn't have those DLLs installed in their machine, the game is just not gonna run. It's gonna give an error, which is actually a common mistake people do. Okay, so this is basically the build script that we're gonna use. The command is very simple, CL, which is also like if you can't use CL, like I said, I explained how to use it. CL is the command to invoke the Visual C++ compiler. I explained it in that video I mentioned, just go watch that one. So we call the compiler, we give it the flags, the compiler flags, we tell it which file to compile. In this case, we only have one. And then we give it the linker flags. Very simple. Now let's go and take a look at the source code because right now we're not using SDL. So first thing, let's include it. SDL.h. So I'm using these less than and greater signs to include it because the header files are included here with this flag. So you don't need to use like these quotes. You can actually use these ones, but the quotes also work, I think. So you can use both with the setup. And the reason I'm doing SDL/SDL.h because of my folder structures. So if you look at that dev directory here again inside include, this folder is the one we're including. We're telling the compiler, look here. So inside of here, I have another folder called SDL. So that's why I'm doing this here. If I were to try using, let's say, handmade math, I would type in like this. And then blah, blah, blah .h, Okay, so with this one, we should have SDL getting included. And I'm really quickly going to initialize it. And that brings up the topic of using SDL. What I want to show you guys is how to use the SDL wiki, basically. Because I have most of the functions that I'm going to use memorized, obviously. But I want to show you guys how I look stuff up and how I find stuff inside of the SDL library, usually. So let's open up Chrome and let's actually do a search for SDL wiki. Let's click the first one. This is it. This is the wiki for SDL. Everything you want to know about SDL is here. And what I usually do is I actually go to, there's lots of useful stuff here. There's like an introduction section, installation. It shows you a bunch of ways you can install SDL on different types of operating systems, some tutorials, articles, lots of good stuff here, FAQ. But what I do usually is I go to the index section, and this basically lists everything that's available to you inside of the SDL library. So you have all these functions here. And in the beginning, it might be scary because there's just so many, but as you use the library more, you get used to it. So what we want to do is we want to initialize SDL. So let's do a search for init, and it's actually called SDL_init. So this is the function we want to use. Let's click on it. And it tells us that it returns an integer and it takes in some flags. So it returns 0 on success. So that's what we want to check for. Negative error code on failure. We can do SDL get error for more information. Blah, blah, blah. And we can use these flags to init different stuff. So as you can see, we can use SDL int audio to initialize the audio subsystem, SDL int video to initialize the video subsystem. There's a bunch of different ones here, and we can also use SDL int everything to just initialize everything. So like I said, I know this stuff. I haven't memorized, but I'm just showing it to you because we're going to be using this a lot, and you're going to be using this a lot when you're programming with SDL. Because like no one can memorize all of this stuff. There's just too much stuff here, and you're not going to use most of it anyway, but I'm just trying to say that no one memorizes this stuff. This is like the normal way of developing. Okay, let's just copy this and let's, oops, okay, that's not it. Let's try again, copy, okay. Let's actually check for, let's say if SDL init, and it says that the return value is 0 on success. So let's say if it's not 0, let's print an error. Okay, so we need to give the flags here, and the flags we're going to use are, well, initially we just need video, but let's also initialize audio and timer because we're going to use those as well. So we can just copy this and just chain these together like this. Finally, the timer. And let's also do this just for now so that we can see that it worked. Okay, I'm going to compile this by pressing Alt-M on forcoder. We could also do it from the command line like I showed you last time. We can go inside the data folder and call code build, and it also works from here. And now let's go into remedy to run our program. Okay, this is the last time we left it like this. We had a deep breakpoint there. So let's try running it with a breakpoint here so that it doesn't exit immediately. And as you can see, it says SDL initialized successfully. So this is working now. We're successfully initializing SDL. Great. And now what we're going to do is we're going to create a window, create a renderer, so that we have a window actually popping up, and we have a renderer so we can draw stuff to it. And we want to start writing the main game loop. But this tutorial is actually getting a bit long, so I'm actually going to stop here, and we're going to do all that cool stuff in the next one. So thank you for watching. I will see you in the next one.